Hey everybody, Michael Davis here, and welcome to Bone2Pick. I am really excited today to be sitting down with one of the great trombone players anywhere in the world, Mr. Colin Williams. Colin is the Associate Principal Trombone of the New York Philharmonic, a position he's held since 2014. Prior to that, he was 12 years with the Atlanta Symphony, and prior to that, 3 seasons with the San Antonio Symphony. He has also performed with the Chicago Symphony, the Boston Symphony Orchestra, the Boston Pops, the Philadelphia Orchestra, the Los Angeles Philharmonic, National Symphony, and Houston Symphony, among others. He is the co-founder of the Southeast Trombone Symposium. Southeast. My Western roots are creeping in there. The Southeast Trombone Symposium. He is an active chamber musician and soloist. He has soloed with the Atlanta Symphony, the Pershing Zone U.S. Army Band, the Juilliard Orchestra. And one of the aspects of this interview that I think is really going to be great is he's an advocate for musicians' wellness and mental health, having experienced a severe lip injury that nearly ended his career. So I'm really interested for all of us to learn more about that. He is a Shires artist and has a signature trombone with the great Shires Company, has a lovely family. His wife, Nikki, is also a trombone player, and they are the proud parents of 2 sons, Christopher and Alex. And before we get rolling, I just want to encourage everybody to subscribe to us on YouTube, share our videos. If you like what you're hearing today, let your friends know about it and help us keep this series, the Bone2Pick series, going. We're enjoying doing it, and it's always helpful to just broaden out our audience. Like us on Facebook, all that kind of social media stuff would be helpful. So without further ado, Colin, welcome. So happy you're here today.
Happy to be here.
Yeah.
Happy to be here.
Thanks for, I know you just came from rehearsal with the
Yep,
Philharmonic, so I
yep.
appreciate it. Let's go all the way back and talk about, I know you grew up in beautiful Massachusetts. Talk a little bit about your early experiences that maybe got you into music and to the trombone, perhaps.
Yeah, you know, my actual, starting the trombone was kind of funny because I didn't actually think of the trombone as an instrument I wanted to play. I wanted to play something cool like the saxophone or the trumpet.
Yeah.
But, you know, my last name was Williams. By the time the band director got around to me, they said, well, we really need some trombone players, and your lips are big enough. I think I'm going to put you on trombone. So here we go. That's how I actually started the trombone. I didn't actually get serious about it until a little bit later, probably maybe freshman year of high school. Okay. Before that, I kind of did a lot of other things. I liked singing. I was actually the lead in my middle school musical.
Wow,
I did
okay.
Merrily We Roll Along. I was Franklin Shepherd.
Nice.
Which is kind of funny to see it have its run in New York right now.
Yeah, right.
But after that, I had some friends who were auditioning for the Greater Boston Youth Symphony Orchestra.
Okay.
They encouraged me to audition. I got in, and we had this camp where you sort of prepare some of the music you're going to play during the season, like up in a camp in Maine.
Oh,
and
right.
Went up there, learned first really piece I played in a great orchestra. It was Dvorak, his 8th Symphony. I remember looking at this thing going, what is that weird thing on the left? Oh, that's a tenor clef and an alto clef. It's like, what is that? I've never heard the. But I was just so caught up in the sound of the orchestra, but also even more so, I think what really hooked me was the sort of camaraderie I felt making the connection with all of these people within the ensemble. And I think that's been something that really has driven me a lot through music, was this ability to form these connections and friendships and ways of communicating that transcend just your normal conversation. When you have, you know this, you have one of these great musical experiences, it's very hard to put it into words. Mm-hmm. You've shared something kind of profound, and that really sort of got me into practicing hard for the first time. So my freshman year, I was very lucky. Doug Wright happened to be in the Boston area at the time. He was playing with Empire Brass and something a lot with the Boston Symphony. Okay. He was my primary teacher through high school. I had great access took some lessons with Norman Bolter.
Oh, cool.
Got to hear the Boston Symphony. I had lots of great experiences in that way, going to the Boston University Tanglewood Institute. Super fortunate to be able to have those experiences as I was growing up that got me sort of even further into the sort of the sound and the culture of the symphonic world. And I had this sort of moment when I was 16 years old. I was like, I was really thinking, oh, do I want to be a lawyer? Do I want to be a doctor? I had a lot of these interests, but I had something that said, if I don't try to do this and see if I can make something with it, I don't want to be the age I am now and looking out the window of my office being, I wish I had tried that. Like I really
Yeah.
just wanted to see if I could do something with it because it had such this, profound ability to connect me to other people that I hadn't figured out how to do in any other way.
Wow, super cool. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, clearly you made the right choice. No doubt about that. Well, let's jump ahead to your college experiences. You went to Manhattan School of Music and Juilliard, and one of the things I think is just so cool is that you were studying with two of the gentlemen who would become your colleagues.
Yeah, that is really, it's one of these really interesting full circle moments. I teach at Manhattan School of Music now, where I first studied. Which is really very funny. I studied 2 years at Manhattan School of Music with David Finlayson. Transferred, did 2 years with Joe over at Juilliard, and then I went off on my own over at San Antonio and Atlanta, and was gone from the New York scene for 15 years before I came back. So that was a very interesting, big full circle moment for me.
Were you, the transfer to Juilliard, was that done because you just wanted to change the channel a little bit, or
there was, I spoke a lot with David about it, and he was very supportive of it. He at the time, just wanted to encourage me to find a bigger studio than what was going on at Manhattan at the time. I think he wanted to get me into that area where I'd be a little bit more challenged by some other circumstances and other students. And so it was something that was very mutually agreed upon, and David even pushed me a little bit to take the audition.
Yeah, so. Great, that's awesome. And I would imagine, the opportunity to study with Joe was exceptionally great.
Exceptionally, right? Obviously it paid off. He's an exceptional teacher. He's so intense, and that intensity was something I think I also needed right at that time in my life. I was 20 years old and getting close to like, okay, this is like I want to start taking auditions, and he has a particular way of focusing on the audition process and focusing you that I think I really needed at that time.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I know. I obviously I'm in a different lane in the business, but I've always heard about Joe's this preparation for auditions is second to none, to say the least. Well, you mentioned San Antonio Symphony, so that must have been exciting getting the job out of school. What was that like, the years in San Antonio?
That was very disorienting because I was so young. I was 22 years old. I didn't actually think I would start working that young, so I almost felt like I wasn't quite ready. And so trying to, at that point, San Antonio had like a 39-week season. It was actually, I got in there for 3 years. The institution has had some rough times and is now, unfortunately, bankrupt, and they're reforming under more musician-friendly leadership. But at the time, it was 3 stable years. I had a blast. There were a lot of young people who were in that orchestra as well, and so we were all driven. We didn't have the support system of school and lessons and that kind of thing, but we had each other, and so we sort of formed this group of folks who was really interested in improving and taking auditions. So we'd play for each other, we'd ask each other a lot of questions. I had a huge learning curve of how to play in the orchestra, how to listen in the orchestra. But fortunately, that ensemble was very kind to me, and they were very patient with me as I was cutting my teeth. And they gave me my first solo opportunity in front of an orchestra. I'm incredibly grateful to that institution for everything that they gave me, and the training I received, and the camaraderie I received while I was down there.
Wow,
it was a fun place to live too.
Wow, very cool, great, awesome. And then you moved from there and won the job in Atlanta Symphony, which is safe to say a step up in the orchestral world.
Yes, absolutely.
And what was and you were there for a number of years.
Yeah,
Atlanta.
12 years. Atlanta was great because, when I joined that orchestra, it was a time of growth. They had just hired Robert Spano and Donald Runnicles. There was a lot of enthusiasm in the group. Chris Martin had just started as principal trumpet like a year or two before me. That's where I met him. And started what has turned out to be another sort of lifelong friendship.
Yeah.
It's actually amazing to we're still playing in the same orchestra somehow after all these years. And I learned much more in Atlanta. It was a bigger orchestra, it was a more seasoned orchestra. It was an orchestra that had a tradition. It was an orchestra that I had to learn how to fit into. And it was there that I think I started to really truly develop my ideas about sound and about style and how to play trombone in orchestra. You know, it was
Wow,
it was
okay.
settled enough that I had to fit into it, and yet I had to bring something of myself. And I started, you know, I was 25 years old at that point, and so I was just beginning to understand what I wanted to do with the instrument. You know, before that in San Antonio, I was still too freaked out, I think, to even understand what I was doing. You know, and this is where I think I started the journey of trying to figure out what I wanted to do as an artist and who I was supposed to be. You know, supposed to be was sort of not the right word, because that's where I think I got myself into trouble with the injury, which happened in Atlanta. You know, it took, I think, going through that part, having the injury, and then moving on to actually get me to the point where I started to actually give myself permission to be myself as an artist. And a lot of this is wrapped up in the injury and the recovery from that.
Well, we'll talk at great length about that in just a minute. I wanted to talk a little bit about your appointment to the New York Philharmonic, which came in 2014. And one of the questions I had when I was preparing for our interview, it must have been somewhat difficult to decide to go from being the principal player in Atlanta to associate principal. And was that something that was a consideration at all for you?
Yeah, you know, I was involved in a negotiating committee in Atlanta where the orchestra was substantially downsized, and it didn't feel that the institution at that point, at that moment, that the orchestra was being valued or appreciated in the way that I felt it should be.
Okay.
And so after this very contentious, very ugly labor negotiation where we lost 10 weeks of the season, we took a huge pay cut, I wanted to be somewhere that felt like that was valued, that the orchestra was valued, you know? And that's, I think, what led me towards looking to other jobs. I had just taken a second trombone audition right before the Philharmonic, where I was in the finals for the National Symphony.
Okay.
You know, and I felt like my time in Atlanta had come to an end. I just felt it just very profoundly at that point.
Okay.
It's just that I'd come to the end of the road, and I just didn't want to be there if that's how we were going to be treated.
Okay, yeah.
That really drove me to seek employment
Sure,
elsewhere.
I can understand that completely. I wasn't unaware of those unfortunate circumstances for the orchestra.
Yeah, we were locked out for like 10 weeks. You know, it left a pretty bitter taste, and I just wanted to go.
Yeah. Well, once again, you made it step up to the New York Philharmonic, no doubt, and must have been great to be working with Joe and David.
Yeah, it was really something to come from being their students to 15 years away to then being colleagues with them again.
Yeah.
You know, I think one of the things I appreciated the most about it, though, actually, is that even though I was their student, and that can be a relationship that sometimes you hear stories about, that dynamic doesn't change even as you go into adulthood. They were never like that. They were right away like colleagues. I never felt any kind of awkwardness or anything like that, although we do chuckle sometimes about some old lessons. You know, a couple good ones too. But no, it's been great. I've always felt very supported at the Philharmonic as well. You know,
Great.
It's been
and George Kern, who's the bass trombone player, who was with you in Atlanta, who came first to New York?
George went 1 year before I did, and it's sort of the same circumstances. I think he felt. I mean, for him, it's a bass trombone job, so it was a lateral move in the sense of the hierarchy within the section, but. Also, he was ready, I think, to make that move too. I mean, when an orchestra goes through a lockout and a really contentious negotiation, it can ruin years of work to build up a place in terms of the morale and within the institution.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk about that as well in a little bit. So exciting times for the Philharmonic with Gustavo Dudamel coming in. Talk a little bit about that. You shared briefly before the interview, like you were a part of the process of finding him or convincing him, however you want to put it.
Well, we were super lucky at the Philharmonic at the time to have Deborah Borda, leading the Philharmonic. She is the one who sort of brought Gustavo to Los Angeles. And when we had the opportunity to start courting him a little bit for New York, she was obviously extraordinarily instrumental in that.
Okay.
But that would never have happened, I don't think, if we didn't have some sort of connection between the orchestra and Gustavo.
Sure.
This is a guy who really, I mean, he could he could go wherever he wants. And at this point, he is everything they say. He's got the chops, the talent, the way he thinks about music, the way he communicates. I mean, he's a profoundly inspiring person to be around. He could have gone anywhere, but when he came to work with us, I mean, we all kind of felt it that there's this connection between the orchestra and him. There is something really, really special going on there. So none of the things we could have done to try to help convince him to come lead our institution, I don't think would have worked if there wasn't that musical connection there to begin with. But then, the orchestra can be great, but you still got to convince them that it's worth making the move, to Los Angeles, to New York. He's got a family, he's got his own ties around the world. Is it going to work? So we spent a lot of time trying to get him to know, like gatherings with musicians, gatherings with members of the board, gatherings with Deborah and other people. In the end, we took a team when we were close. I think we took a very small team to Paris on this sort of secret mission to sort of surprise Gustavo and make the push. I went with Chris Martin. We were there sort of as musician representatives at the time. I was chair of the committee, and I believe Chris was on the artistic committee at the time. And we sort of surprised him that he knew he was going to be meeting with Deborah and with some of the other leadership and some of the board members, Oscar Tang and Agnes Shutang and Peter May. But he didn't know that we were going to be there, and so we did this whole thing where like he was just meeting with them and in the hotel room, and they were just sort of, it's like, oh, something's weird. The reservation got messed up. Just come join us at the hotel. And during the day, Chris and I sort of put together this little duet arrangement of. It started off as Rhapsody in Blue, and then turned into New York, New York, and so he's in there talking with them. We kind of bust in and with some champagne and stuff and play this little duet for him. And we brought him a gift of bourbon, because we know he likes bourbon, whiskey, this kind of stuff, Widow Jane bourbon, which is, from upstate New York bourbon.
Cool,
so,
yeah.
And just we all went out to dinner and just made the pitch. The only thing that Chris and I were there for was just as a reminder that yes, the musicians in the New York Philharmonic were just, we wanted him and no one else to be the music director of the Philharmonic, that we felt so strongly, and it really was. I mean, the committees that I was a part of at the time, we really sort of canvassed the orchestra, and it was just clear everyone down to have that level of unanimity about anything in an orchestra is impossible. And I think only someone like Gustavo could bring that out of an orchestra. It really is something really special when he comes to conduct us.
That's exciting. So when does he start?
I believe next season is his first season as music director. I think he's like music director designate this year. I mean, there's all these titles, and I'm lose track of the title.
Okay.
But I think next year is his first full-on year.
And how long is his contract for?
I'm not sure how long he signed. Maybe 5 years was the initial deal, or something like that. But I honestly, don't quote me on that one, because I can't quite remember.
But it's for multiple years.
It's for multiple years, yes, of course. Yeah.
Awesome. Staying in the orchestral vein, you've straddled both things as being more a part of the section, but also being a principal player. And with your students, for yourself as a top professional, what are the qualities that you kind of look for that? I'm sure there's some similarities between both of those things, being a member of a section and also being a principal player. But what are I can't even talk anymore. Specifically, what are some of the qualities that you look for in principal players and in section players?
Yeah. So I feel like if you're a principal player, your job is really to try to find a way to bring out the best in the section.
Right.
And that means that it's more than just coming in and playing great and laying it down. I mean, of course, that's all part of the job. But I think a truly great leader in those roles is someone who makes everyone in the section feel comfortable, so that they are prepared to take risks and have a shared mutual interest in sounding great together.
Right.
Because you never know. In an orchestral section, you could have a big spread of age and generations and this kind of thing. You've got to get to to know each other a little bit, and you can't just come in there and be like, all right, this is the way it's going to be, and blah, blah, blah. I mean, you have principles like that, and in my experience, when that is the kind of leadership you're experiencing, the sections become dysfunctional. You know,
Yeah,
people don't
yeah.
have a shared interest aside from just getting through the concert and being left alone. You know, that's not the way to lead. I think leadership to me is about creating a shared vision that you're all part of, and then being really consistent and true to yourself that you have to follow through on it. So that means if you are a principal player, you've got to do all the work at home to make sure that you're playing the way you want to play, that you're consistent, you're bringing all the skills and qualities that you expect others, you know, that you want to invite other people to be part of, you know. And then you want to treat people with respect and have a shared vision and create an atmosphere where you can work on things together and always, you know, approach things with humility. You know, to me, that's always the best way to do it. If you're the greatest leaders are not the ones who have to tell you they're in charge all the time. They're just there, they're consistent, and they invite you into being part of you know, something bigger than just playing your one part.
Yeah, yeah.
And I mean, there's lots of technical things you want to do as a principal. You know how to lead, know how to breathe, know how to show cutoffs and entrances and that kind of stuff.
Sure, yeah.
But I think the most important thing is to have a vision and to get people to want to participate in it by treating them with respect and by being a really great colleague.
Yeah. And you're working with two of the best between Joe and Chris. I mean, that's in terms
absolutely.
of the brass section. I've heard nothing but amazing things about both of them as principal players. Okay, let's shift over a little bit, and you were gracious enough to talk about your lip injury and your proponent of, you know, mental health and wellness for musicians. So important now, and I think it's coming out in just a much more healthy and significant way than it has in the past. But just share whatever you'd like to talk about with that.
I mean, so I think before I talk about my personal story, I think you're right. I think that that's something that we as brass players have not until very recently done a very good job of is talking about some of the struggles that happen. Invariably over your career, I find that a lot of people go through sort of tough times. Maybe sometimes they didn't know it, but they've sort of overexerted themselves. They've gone into overuse. They don't really know how to get out of it. They don't understand what's happening. And then I've found that there are a lot of people who have gone through minor injuries, you know, in their careers as well, and then just been very quiet about it and not wanted to talk about it because it's almost like you're ashamed or like, what did I do wrong, or why, you know, it must be my fault, or you don't want people to think you're damaged goods and not call you. You know, one of the things I think string players, and to a similar degree, I think woodwind players, they're more upfront about some of the injuries and injury prevention that happens with them. You know, the large muscle groups they're more easily understood. There's a lot more crossover. You know, string players, I think, have been much more open about, okay, when something happened, do this, do that, do that, and there's lots of stories of people coming back.
Yeah.
We didn't have those kinds of stories when I went through my injury, you know, so it felt very much like lost in the wilderness because we just weren't talking about it in the brass world. My injury itself happened during a period of just general overuse. I was practicing too much. I think I said earlier, what should I be? I thought I should be this as a trombone player. I should be doing that. I should be doing that. I was basically taking other people's careers and turning it into my career without asking myself what I really wanted to do. And so one of the results of that was sort of unhealthy, obsessive practice. You know, I was practicing hours and hours a day and then going off and doing my shows.
Okay.
I was very strong, or so I thought. But in the end, what I ended up doing was sort of over time and getting a little bit older, chronic state of fatigue led me to a concert in October of 2009 where I went to play a note. Boom, felt like someone had basically taken like a white hot needle and just shoved it straight up into the lip. I've got like this tunnel vision, like if someone smacked you on the side of the head. The note double buzzed in a way that I have never heard before or since. Like the weirdest, strangest, sounded like, you know, Chewbacca from Star Wars if you put him through a megaphone and distortion. It was really a bizarre sound.
Wow.
I kind of got through the rest of the concert, but noticed it's like, okay, that was weird. That really hurt. And then it gets these little shocks of pain again. I started getting more tired than I thought. I said, oh, okay, I'll just take a couple days off. It's fine, you know. Came back, nothing had really changed. Still would hurt, get these shocks of pain. I tried playing, not really knowing what was going on for about 8 weeks. By the end of that 8 weeks, I remember looking in the mirror and seeing, oh wow, what is that? Oh, there's this huge divot in my lip now. Where did that come from, and what's happening with that? I took a picture of it. I still show to people sometimes of what it looked like, and it almost looked like if you took like a bunch of fishing wire, and put it right up against your lip. There's absolutely nothing here.
Wow.
What I found out later is that was a pretty substantial partial tear of the orbicularis oris, which is the muscles that form the musculature around the lip. What had happened right around where the mouthpiece curvature is that the muscles sort of went partially like that. The outer layers of it just sort of snapped. And then over time, the reason the divot formed is that all that muscle tissue, once it becomes torn, it kind of atrophies and
Okay.
kind of goes away. So that muscle tissue was kind of reabsorbed, and scar tissue started to form in its stead. And even today, there's still like a divot in my lip.
Really?
It's just that
Wow.
the surviving muscle tissue underneath it has thickened up and strengthened over time. And I've also changed a little bit of the way that I do things. So that was the initial sort of moment of like being, holy crap, something
Yeah.
really profoundly bad is
Something
happening
yeah.
here. I found I started went on the internet, and there was hardly anything on the internet.
Yeah.
There were only two things that I found. One was a really old thing about a doctor in Spain, I think in the 60s or something, and he came up with the name of it, Satchmo syndrome, right? Because Louis Armstrong, they sort of assumed he had a tear of some kind, and so he just used his nickname to name the syndrome when working with an injured player in Spain. And it was Cindy Lewis at embouchures.com. And that was the only things I could find. So I got in touch with Cindy and started learning a little bit about the fact that there was this entire world out there of people who had been injured. And because she had been upfront about with her injury, she was telling me that she had literally had hundreds and hundreds of emails over the years of people with injuries. And it started dawning on me, it's like, it's that common? She's like, it's that common,
Wow.
So that was where I started freaking out a little bit. Found a doctor. That was the other thing. I was like, okay, someone who's actually specialized in this, a guy up in Toronto named Dr. Simon McGrail. And went up to him after talking to Cindy. I just wanted to know what was going on here with this divot. He checked it out and said, yeah, you've got a partial tear. And so he prescribed these sort of calisthenic exercises and said, well, come back in a month. Do these things religiously. Come back in a month. Came back in a month. It's like, oh, didn't really heal up the way I'd like yet. Let's come back in another month. No. Went on for 4 months. At this point, no playing.
I was just going to ask if you,
Yeah,
assuming you didn't play.
I couldn't play anymore because my sound wouldn't hold together the way I sort of expected. But even more so was just that random shocks of pain. Whether high, low, loud, soft, seemingly at random, you could be playing and it'd be like, bam.
Wow. Okay.
Just like lightning, and it was kind of terrifying, honestly.
Yeah.
As I'm going through this period of taking, okay, I'm off 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, no playing. At the end of this, the doctor says, well, this didn't really heal up the way I wanted. You might as well try to play again, but I don't think it's going to work out for you. So when you're done with that, you can come back and have surgery. And I had done enough research at that point to know what these surgeries were like and how invasive they were and how uncertain the outcomes were, that I remember flying back home, sitting on my couch that night, looking all around me, looking at the ceiling. Well, this roof over my head is because of the trombone. The food in my fridge is because of the trombone. This couch I'm sitting on is because of the trombone. If I can't play, what the hell am I going to do? Who am I even?
Yeah.
Like, I had no idea what to do. That moment is probably where, I had anxiety building at that point, but that was probably where it became just unbearable in terms of the anxiety,
Man.
and the depression that sort of comes along with it, because I didn't know what was going to happen.
Yeah.
And so I did at this point find another doctor who I went to speak to, one in Atlanta actually, and one in Baltimore, and got a little bit more of a clear explanation, in terms of what was going on, really described the physiology of my injury. And after that, also met Lori Frink,
Sure.
and
Of course.
I credit her with sort of giving me a path out of it.
Okay.
Although I have to say, out of any lesson I've ever taken in my entire life, I've never been so nervous for a lesson. You know?
Wow.
Because I felt like this is maybe the pronouncement of the rest of my life. I don't know. Like, you know,
Sure.
she worked with so many players. You know, she knew Carmen Caruso. She was a master of this. And at this point, as I learned, she was almost exclusively working with injured players at that time. She, more than anyone else, I think, had the skills and the ability to diagnose and maybe help you out. And so I remember walking up to her place, like just like knees shaking, terrified, because, you know, after
like your life is just staring you down.
You're waiting for this pronouncement. It's like, are you going to make it or not?
Yeah.
But I have to say, with her, she was such like I don't know how to say it. You know, it's almost like grandmotherly presence. You know, when I went in there, so calming. You know, she had this nice cat, and you know, the first thing she had me do was just play like, okay, 2-octave B flat major scale, soft, slow, take your time.
Yeah.
And I remember going through that, just playing this, and I could play at that point enough, you know, to know that I could get up and down on the instrument.
Okay.
And sort of play it, put my horn down, and she said, listen, you're going to be okay, and this is why. You know, and so we went through the whole thing about you know, the injury and how to recover from it, and why she thought I was going to be okay based on what I had done. And we basically put together a plan to kind of rehabilitate my chops and try to get me going again.
Wow.
And that was back in 2010. The thing that she prepared me for, which I heard the words but didn't appreciate the magnitude of it at the time, and also the doctor in Baltimore prepared me for, was the fact that there was going to be long-lasting physical discomfort from this injury, even when things were better, even when I was playing.
Okay.
What I didn't anticipate was the fact that that would go on for about 9 years of having pain in some way, shape, or form. The first 2 years or so was just on the daily throbbing pain in the injured area, whether or not I was doing anything. Certain syllables like puh, muh, that kind of thing, things where I might purse my lip, I had to change the way I spoke because those could even set off little flicks of pain.
Wow.
It was always the first thing I felt when I woke up, and the last thing I felt before I went to sleep was that sort of throbbing pain. And that was mentally very tough.
Sure.
Even when I won the Philharmonic job, I still was not totally over having a little bit of pain from time to time.
Okay.
But obviously I had learned how to cope with it by then. But it was a long, long period of time. And I think that's one of the things that is really challenging about these injuries, is that these soft tissue injuries, they can bother you for a long time.
A long time.
Even when you are ostensibly recovered. I mean, it's hard for me to say I wasn't recovered. I mean, if I was able to perform and get to finals and win an audition, it'd be silly to say that I wasn't recovered. But at the same time, I didn't feel fully at ease yet. So it ends up being a very long journey.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing all that. I mean, what a journey, and so helpful, I think, for all our viewers to hear something like that. I'm so sorry you went through that. I mean, it's the mental side of it too, just like the uncertainty had to be overwhelming at times.
And I think that this is something that I think we don't talk about a lot. This is more than just brass players. I think just as musicians, you know, there is a huge amount of stress and that is associated with being a musician. I think that for me, one of the reasons I got into this area of obsessive practice was because I started identifying my entire self-worth with like the last thing that came out of my horn. You know? So if I had a bad concert that night, it wasn't just, oh, I had a bad show or whatever, like, you know, oh, it didn't go as well as wanted. It's like I was a bad person. You know, I didn't realize I was doing that at the time, but that's what I was doing. I had my entire identity wrapped up in this instrument in a way that I think is profoundly unhealthy for us. I think even in a way, it prevented me from exploring who I even was as an artist, because I was so, you know, entrenched in this idea is that my own self-worth is as good as whatever I'm going to play. How are you going to take risks or grow if you're afraid to fail, you know, and if your failure is a pronouncement on who you are? It led to me, I didn't realize it at the time, that I think you know, sort of fed into these sort of depressive tendencies that I had. And then when the injury happened, that fully broke it open for me. You know, that was at that time that I became really like clinically depressed. You know, I had never felt anything quite like it before. You know, it's almost like this weight where you can't really get out of bed. You can't find the joy in anything that's going on around you. And that depression's, you know, best friend is anxiety. So at the same time that I felt just exhausted and just wanted to sleep, I couldn't because the noise of the anxiety would just keep me up at night. Yeah. You know, and it took me a long time to figure out what I needed to do, and finally I found someone to talk to. You know, found a therapist. I ended up taking you know, medications for both the depression and the anxiety that gave me enough relief from those symptoms so that I could actually focus on getting my playing back together, because I don't think I could have borne the uncertainty and the work and been patient enough in the practice room without that kind of health. And so what I tell a lot of people who go through injuries now is that you got to make sure the biggest part of recovering is making sure that you have a strong mental health support system around you. And that could be your family. It could be, if you're a part of a faith tradition, it could be that. It could, I always say, you know, therapists are helpful. There's so many different things, but you can't bear the burden alone. And I think the more practiced someone is in terms of helping people who are suffering from depression and anxiety, the better it's going to be for you to be able to find your way out of these injuries. It's just too heavy a burden to do while also carrying that mental health burden, you know? And I think that we as musicians, we all know it. I mean, you all know people, we go through these kinds of things. We're very emotional people to start with. That's why we do what we do, you know? And so having that kind of burden can really put a lot of us over the edge. And I think that the more that we talk about this, you know, not only in the music community, but just generally, mental health is just as important as physical health, you know, and we have to take it seriously. And so if you go through one of these periods in your playing, where like me, where it's injury, you have to be extra vigilant about it, because there's no way to take care of the body without taking care of your mind and your emotions too. So well said, beautiful. And I couldn't agree more. Different circumstances, but I'm, for the first time in my life, for the last year, I've found a great therapist, and I couldn't have put it any better than you just said it. That's exactly what it is, and I strongly encourage anybody who's dealing with anything to find that support group like you're saying. So thank you for sharing all of that. Just as a side note for some of our viewers, for those of you who don't know Lori Frank, I'm sure most of you do, but she was an amazing trumpet player here in New York, and I worked with her a bunch with various folks. Bob Minster's big band comes to mind. And then, as Colin pointed out so beautifully, like she became really a guru and like a leader of chop recovery and lip issues. And she was an amazing person. Sadly, no longer with us. But what great work that she did. One of the greatest regrets in my entire life is that, like, she was so great. I would send her recordings of things I was doing, and she would always respond, and she was always so encouraging, and so, like, you know, it made me so happy to be able to share this with her. And when I came to New York, she was already ill. You know, and I never got a chance. My whole thing was I wanted to go see her one more time and to be able to thank her and to just tell her how grateful I was for everything that she gave me, the hope, the way forward, and for the way that she was so supportive and patient and inspiring. And it's still, it hurts. I wish I had had a chance to say thank you one more time. Yeah, for sure. Let's change gears again and talk a little bit about the Southeast Trombone Symposium. Sorry for my mess up in the intro. But tell us about that. And I know it was born out of the Atlanta Trombone Project. And tell us a little bit about that. So at the time, it's actually funny because my whole injury is wrapped up in this too, because the first STS was right after I was injured, and I hadn't played in almost a year. My first notes were right after coming back from seeing the doctor in Baltimore and that kind of thing. We're actually at STS with George Kern, just playing perfect fits together for a little bit at Pianissimo. But no, we came up with this idea because, you know, Joe at the time had started his seminar, the Laskey seminar, and I had attended it a couple times, and it was such a great experience getting all these trombone players together and just really making a deep dive into the craft, about in all aspects of it. And the thing is, with Joe, there's only one Joe. He can only be one place at one time. And at the time, there weren't that many seminars out there that were kind of modeled like that. And we just had this idea. We had this great partner, Brad Palmer, Dr. Palmer down at Columbus State. We did the recording with him, and then we started talking like, we should do something here. This is a really cool thing. We had this great section in Atlanta, and they had these incredible facilities down in Columbus, and it's just like an hour and a half drive. So we came up with this idea, and we started small. We had like 16 people or something that first year, but we wanted to create something that was not just in the Northeast, and something else that other people could come to. And it just sort of went crazy from there. Like year after year, I think the last time we had we've had up to 100 people at these things before.
Wow.
We're bringing in faculty from all over the place. The fact that people keep coming back actually is amazing to me, because I was like, I don't know if people are going to come to this thing. And it's just turned into this really amazing experience that I feel is great, because we're approaching it, you're trying to bring up the craft, but also we're trying to make sure that we're building a community that is really more reflective of what the trombone community, I think, what I want to see in the trombone community. I think I'm married to a trombonist, and she, when she was coming up, there were not nearly as many women in the trombone world, and some of the stuff that she had to deal with was pretty bad.
For sure.
The sexism, the misogyny, and that kind of thing. And one of the things that I like that we are continue to put emphasis on in the Southeast Trombone Symposium is that trombone is not just like the dude's instrument. It's like this trombone is really for anyone who wants to play.
Yeah.
And the more that we have a community where more people are brought in, the better that community is going to be. You're going to have different perspectives, ideas, different ways to make music together, different ways of understanding things together. And I one of the things I think I'm most proud of for STS is the fact that I feel that we are continuing to try to build in a positive way, a community that's really for everyone.
Yeah. Well, you guys have built something amazing. I mean, it's really one of the preeminent symposiums anywhere. I mean, it's fantastic.
It's crazy.
Yeah, that's great. I wanted to touch on something that's slightly outside of the box, but you have a lot of experience as a negotiator for representing musicians in negotiations with management.
Yes.
Clearly, most recently, fairly contentious negotiations with New York Philharmonic. But now, I mean, you shared it earlier. I was unaware of that, but you were already involved in that in Atlanta.
Yes.
Sounds like.
Yep.
But talk to me a little bit about, if you would, like just how that process works and how what caused you to have interest in that. I'm sure you have to have interest if to put up with what you have to do.
You got to sort through a lot of stuff on these committees, So the way the orchestra business works is we are most of the larger orchestras in the U.S. are union orchestras.
Right.
We're all part of the AFM, and we have all the contracts that are negotiated between the local chapters and the particular managements. So for New York, it's Local 802. It comes to an agreement with the New York Philharmonic Symphony Society, I think is the technical name. This Philharmonic Society, something like that. You'd think I should know that after all these years, but I'm blanking on it at the time being. But one of the reasons that we did that is that, in the old days, you can go back and look at these old recordings of Toscanini, just berating his orchestra. People would be fired for the smallest infractions. People could be hired, just on this total buddy system. It was, you never knew what you were going to get. There was so little security. And how are you supposed to dedicate your life to a craft and to being in a place if there's literally no security, and you can be fired and disposed of and replaced so easily? So I think orchestras started to unionize. I think a lot of these contracts became much more official and substantiated sort of in the 50s and 60s. And that's where we started really seeing the existence of these collective bargaining agreements and the strengthening of the kinds of living standards and wage standards that we have in a lot of orchestras. So now we have things that, a guaranteed vacation, long-term disability insurance, important for me. I was on LTD, and it was necessary because, in the past I could have been fired because I couldn't play. You have, your minimum guaranteed wages, you have health care, you have, all the particular sort of everything that has to do with the way that your employment works is in there. Auditions have been hugely important, trying to get that system to be less and less susceptible to bias and prejudice and this kind of thing. And so we continually are refining and making the audition rules better in that regard, so that again we're inviting more people to come and participate in a process that is to the greatest degree that we can, free of bias. Is it perfect? Hell no, we got a lot of work to do, but I feel that it's moving in a direction. The discussions are being had that are important. So all those things really determine what's your life going to be like in an orchestra. And so when I was in Atlanta, the committee there, the orchestra committee, was really smart. They would bring young people into the orchestra committee. They asked them to run. You have to be elected. But then they would sort of train you a little bit about, this is how it works. This is what you do. This is how you meet with management. These are the things you talk about. These are the ways we enforce the rules of the contract. And just over time, I felt like it was something that you had to do, you should do if you're a member of an orchestra. It's a idea. The orchestra committee is often named in a lot of collective bargaining agreements as sort of we're kind of responsible for sort of being the liaison between the management and the union, and also we're the ones who bring the concerns of the orchestra forth. We're the ones that can sort of bring up problems. We grievances, all these other kinds of things. That all originates with the orchestra committee. So the orchestra committee is a really powerful group of musicians that is there to help represent their peers, and protect the rights that we have within the collective bargaining agreement.
Okay, interesting. Oh, thank you. How many members are on a negotiating committees typically?
In my first negotiation here at the Philharmonic, it was only 5, which is a huge amount of work for 5 people.
Yeah.
We expanded it during this last negotiation. I think we were 7. In Atlanta, it was always 7.
Okay.
I think a little bit more than 5. 5 is too small.
Too small. Okay. Yeah. Sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah.
So just overall, for sure. Well, let's talk about something wildly more popular and much more positive. Our relationships with the great S.C. Shires Company. I know you have a wonderful signature trombone.
Yep.
And in fact, my buddy, our buddy, Koichiro Yamamoto in Seattle, is always telling me how much he loves your horn. Yeah. And so anyway, talk to me about your relationship with Shires and how that blossomed and all.
Shires was great. When we were in Atlanta, George and I, we were sort of looking for a new sound. We were playing. We liked our equipment, but we were looking for something different. We weren't sure what direction to go, and it just so happened that this guy named Newell Sheridan was bringing some of his horns through town, and he was a Shires dealer, and we went in there and tried them, and just immediately just sort of kind of fell in love with the sound of the instruments. And so over time, I would go up to Boston. My parents were still living there at the time, and I would stop in at the factory and hang a little bit with Steve Shires, and we'd like mess around with some stuff, and he'd tweak some things, and like we just kept messing with things until eventually, over time, and when I got into the Philharmonic, we came up with sort of the setup that is now the sort of signature model. It was my sound is really in the needs. My needs have changed a lot over time. At this point by the time I got to that stage in the Philharmonic, I'd gone through the injury. I just wanted efficiency. I didn't want to play on anything larger than I needed to play on.
Yeah.
I wanted everything to be like as responsive as possible. I needed to not overburden this system. I needed it to be as responsive as I could. And I think that's what we came up with the instrument that we sell as my signature model. Is I spent a lot of time working with them to try to find this particular sort of like component of parts. And of course, every individual player is going to have their own particular thing. But what I like about the signature series, is that someone has invested some time to go after a particular concept of sound. And so you can try it, you can always tweak it, but sometimes it's nice that you can dial it in a little bit. Someone spent the time really tweaking these little things to get a particular concept. And because that can be very disorienting when you go into these showrooms. It's like, how many bells, how many slides, how many tuning crooks, how many different things. It's nice to start somewhere, and I think that's why I like these signature series, is that you have people who have their own concepts and we've put in that time to build these things to make it perform a certain way.
Yeah.
And Shires has been super, super supportive of me over the years as well. And supportive of Southeast Trombone Symposium. They donate horns like every year for people to win in competitions. It's really
fantastic.
It's an amazing thing that they do.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful for that relationship and the support that I've had from Shires over the years.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And I'm just so happy to see the health of the company now doing so
Yeah,
well.
yeah,
And
yep.
leadership from Samantha and
Samantha's amazing.
and all
Amazing.
the folks at Eastman, Ryan. You know, it's just been terrific. And seeing Alexis come up and Matt and everybody's just doing great work there. And it's a pleasure to be a part of it. I know you obviously feel exactly the same way. So that's very cool. Well, Colin, thank you so much for coming up today. Just a couple more things before we put a wrap on it. But you know, you're impactful, obviously, in so many ways. Certainly as a trombonist, as a musician, but also what you went through and how you conquered such a difficult time in your life, and your teaching. What do you look for in younger players, and what kind of advice would you have for younger players who are looking to perhaps form a career as an orchestral musician, and how is that path in your eyes? It seems to me like everything, it becomes a little bit more difficult than say when you or I came up and things. But you have tremendous insight and vision on so many things. What kind of things do you share in terms of young people that are looking to go into this?
Yeah. So what I end up listening for students when I you know, am at MSM or something like that, listening to auditions, I'm not looking for like note perfect kind of stuff. Like I think sometimes students come into these auditions, they're just like, okay, gotta be perfect, can't miss a note. To me, I'm not really about that. I'm kind of like, is this person trying to say something with the instrument? You know, because I think that I really like working with folks who are bringing something interesting to say, right? And that's what I listen for almost more than anything else. Do you have like are you experimenting with something? Or do you have that sort of like inner drive that's going to make you experiment with music a little bit? Because I think you need that to sustain you through all of that work that you're going to do in the practice room to, you know, hone your craft. Is that you've got to have a little bit of that joy, a little bit of that more than. And the reason I think about this more is that I wish I had recognized it in myself and allowed that to be more part of what I did, as opposed to getting into the obsessive perfectionism that I got into that was so unhealthy for me. In terms of what students need to do now, it's a really, I mean, the landscape is so different than when I came up and when you came up. I mean, the sheer amount of playing that they have access to listen to now on YouTube, on whatever, is incredible. At the same time, some of the stuff outside of the symphony orchestra, some of the recording work that used to exist is shrinking.
Yeah,
you know?
For sure.
But there are still ways to make a life in music, you know, and I think that's what I encourage all of my students to be thinking, is that what is it that you are interested in? What do you want to say with the instrument, and how can you say it? You know, does that mean that you want to make sort of some overdub tracks and talk about what you're doing? Are you someone who wants to get a little bit more into like mixing things? Are you someone who wants to play on Broadway? Are you someone who wants to freelance? You want to, like, there's so many different avenues, and I think they've got to take in a ton of information and be questioning themselves and challenging themselves all the time as to like what really drives them. You know, don't just say I want to play in an orchestra because that is a very, you know, well-trodden path. You know, ask yourself, do you love orchestral music enough to put in all that time working on excerpts, or is something else driving you to want to play the trombone? I think you want to be really open to a lot of different kinds of music. You know, I think you need to listen to a lot of different kinds of music. I think the idea that you come in and you like listen to a couple of like, you know, solo trombone albums, you know, I'm going to listen to Joe's catalog, and like that's the ideal. Definitely listen to Joe's catalog of stuff because it's amazing, but open your ears up to many of the other things. I mean, for those who use Joe as an example, just because he has so many recordings, one of the things that's been interesting about Joe over time is, as you know, it's like he listens to so many other things. He has so many other streams. So just watching him develop his ear and interest in being able to play and to improvise and play jazz and this kind of thing. You know, I think we have to always be exploring, trying to find something that is going to be our new sound, or something that's going to get us you know, new ideas on how to play and how to express ourselves. You know? And so I think that for a lot of my students, I just want them to listen to as much different kinds of music as they can. One thing I think that is, from a technical thing, that students have to negotiate now, though, is that you do have to learn to double, I think, in order to work in this sound anymore. You know, like
without question.
Yeah, you got to be able to play tenor and bass trombone if you're going to play on Broadway. For the most part. Like,
for sure.
You got to be able to play some bass trombone. If you're really still all about the orchestra path and you're tenor trombone, trombone player, you're going to have to play alto trombone. You know, it's out there. So I think being willing to learn how to double while you're in school, I think at least on one of those instruments is really, really important, because it's just nowadays you get principal trombone auditions, required alto trombone. You know? Going to work on Broadway, you got to play. If you're a bass trombone player, you got to play tuba. You know, it's like doubling is a real thing now that is I think more important now than it was even 20 years ago.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's really great advice. Great advice. Last thing, what's coming up for Colin Williams here in the next phase of your life? I know you have your young sons, and that's I know having two sons myself, it's one of the great experiences of life.
Amazing. I actually, it is truly the great joy of my life to have my family.
Awesome.
And I look forward to just sort of like seeing what they're interested in every day, and sort of watching what they go into. I could not love that more than I do. When it comes to trombone, I actually just finished recording a duo album with the Japanese soloist Yu Tamaki.
Oh, okay. Wow.
He's a very dear friend from years ago, and we recorded some duets and a couple solos. So we'll be trying to get that out in the next few months. We're doing a trombone quartet tour in probably about 3 or 4 months from now, I guess. That seems about right. Where it's him, it's my wife, Nikki, and Chris Bassett, who's the bass trombonist at St. Louis Symphony, unbelievable player. We played in a quartet together at the Southeast Trombone Symposium. Loved doing it so much. We did a tour in Japan together, and now we're going to do one we're going to play at University of Alabama. We're going to be playing up in Tennessee over the course of like a week. And I predict we will be recording something over the next year.
Oh, exciting.
And also I want to do another solo album. And so I'm sort of putting together these ideas for what I want to play on that one. And I'm going to help Nikki to get her solo album moving as well. So we got a lot of stuff going on in the trombone side of things as well.
That's awesome. Well, Colin, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for coming to NIAC, and what a wonderful opportunity to sit down and hear your incredible life and the path that the journey that you went on to get where you are, and it's inspiring.
Well, thank you for having me. Really,
I hope everybody enjoyed hearing about the great Colin Williams today. It's really an inspiration. So, we will definitely see all of you next time on Bone2Pick.